listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, Qantas has been hit with a massive cyber attack, potentially exposing the private data of up to 6 million Australians. So how did this latest major corporate attack happen? And if your personal data has been stolen, what should you do? All the details coming up. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Wednesday, the 2nd of July. A second Victorian man has been charged with serious offences, including rape and bestiality, after a Melbourne childcare worker was yesterday accused of 70 offences. Michael Simon Wilson has been charged with 45 offences as part of a major investigation into child sex abuse. These latest charges do not involve the childcare facilities at the centre of alleged predator Joshua Brown, but it's believed both the men are known to each other. The latest charges come as the Victorian government announced a major overhaul of childcare regulations, which include banning childcare workers from having mobile phones inside childcare centres and investigating the installation of CCTV in facilities and an overhaul of working with children checks. Here is the Victorian Premier, Jacinta Allen.
Families must be able to trust that their children are safe when they are placed in the care in childcare centres. And I will do everything in my power to make sure that parents can trust the system.
A third person has been arrested in relation to the alleged murder of Queensland teenager Phoebe Bishop. 30-year-old Kieran Daniel Mitterhauser has been charged with 2 counts of accessory after the fact of murder. Here is Queensland Police with an update.
It will be alleged the 30-year-old man used the victim's mobile phone to interfere with the investigation. Following extensive investigations, detectives arrested the man shortly after 7 p.m. last night in Bundaberg West. The 30-year-old man has been charged with 2 counts of accessory after the fact of murder.
And the truce didn't last, with Donald Trump and Elon Musk fighting again. The Tesla billionaire lashed out again over the sky-high cost of the US government's big, beautiful bill, calling it insane. The US president was quick to hit back, warning he could deport the South African-born billionaire, saying the Department of Government Efficiency, which Musk once ran, is the monster that might go back and have to eat Elon. Musk, who also threatened to set up a new political party, then wrote on the social media platform X, quote, "So tempting to escalate this, so tempting, but I will refrain for now." Now it's time to get into our deep dive on the Qantas cyber attack with cybersecurity expert Professor Matthew Warren. Investigations are continuing, but it's believed third-party systems have been compromised, with the names, contact details, birth dates and frequent flyer details stolen, with up to 6 million Australians possibly affected. Experts are warning that private information can be on-sold and then used for ID theft and fraud. Matthew, thanks so much for joining us. How serious is this cyber security hack with Qantas?
It's serious because it's impacted 6 million customers. So it's, of national significance. The other serious impact is that it was a third-party platform that, contain customers' data. So it would have been, like a call center, for example, that had access to that data. So it meant that the attacker, was able to compromise not Qantas security, but the security of that third party to gain access to all of that Qantas information. So it does raise questions for all Australian businesses, because a lot of Australian businesses use third party to run call centres, customer support. Is how secure are those, supply chain relationships, third party relationships in terms of protection of corporate data?
So in regards to this actual data, when you look at the information they've been able to access, the initial review that Qantas has confirmed, the data includes customers' names, email addresses, phone numbers, birth dates and frequent flyer numbers. Not at this stage credit card details, but one may argue that's enough information to actually engage in ID fraud.
Yes, and that's part of the reason gangs like this are behind these types of attacks, is they're after personally identifiable information that they could use for ID fraud, or even sell on the dark web to other criminal gangs who want to focus on identity fraud attacks. So it means the data itself becomes a commodity, and that data is the commodity the hackers actually want, that they can either use themselves or sell on to third parties via the dark web.
So, what risk is there for 6 million Australians that we understand have been compromised their data? What risk is that information now going to be used for ID fraud?
So the risk is that people may contact Qantas customers either via phone or via email, pretending to be from Qantas or someone else, trying to gain more information. So it's like the first step in the process, and what they have is that first step in the process is they would have a customer's name, they would have their way to contact them, and again they also have their Qantas membership number is a way of proving that they are Qantas. So again, the thing about these sorts of scams attacks is it's then trying to gain the trust out of the victim to share even more information, and additional information that they'd be after is things like passport details, credit card details, for instance.
Matthew, you mentioned earlier that it looks like this was a major cyber attack on a third party, not directly Qantas. One may argue that's about also companies taking all of their call centres offshore, obviously to cut costs. What type of responsibility do these companies have to face that they are outsourcing this information and our private data to third-party companies that is more likely to be hacked?
It's interesting because on a number of levels. One is contractually there'll be a service level agreement between Qantas and that third party, and as part of that service level agreement, they would define the levels of security that they have in place to protect that company's data. The second point, a more interesting one, is under Australian's privacy law, data about Australian citizens cannot leave Australia. So if data of Australian citizens have been proven to have been taken from a call centre in another country, that actually breaches our Privacy Act, which is also a major issue of concern, and the Information Commissioner may also get involved in that. So they haven't declared the location of the third party, whether it is overseas or in Australia, but I imagine there may be some sensitivity around that if that third party is actually overseas.
I did not know that. So if it's proved that that data has been compromised overseas by a third party, that is in breach of our privacy rules and regulations in Australia.
Yeah, because with our privacy laws, data about Australian citizens is not allowed to leave Australia. So this is why, for instance, in Australia, we have a lot of the cloud companies like Microsoft and Google and AWSN having the cloud services directly in Australia is to conform with our Australian privacy laws.
So is that a serious red flag for a lot of Australian companies if they do have this private data overseas and it is compromised? They could be found in breach of some pretty serious national regulations.
Well, again, it's a problem with all sort of provisions is whether those questions have been asked, whether they've been actually tested, to prove that third party, well, where does our data actually reside? How can you prove to us that our data resides only in Australia? But yeah, it does raise questions, but it also raises, I suppose, the complex nature of the way in which sort of modern businesses operate, that, data reside, in theory, can reside all over the world, and how Australian companies actually prove their data is actually within, the Australian sovereignty to conform with our Privacy Act. And this also poses challenges with Qantas because they're sort of, engaging with the Australian Cyber Coordination Officer and the Australian Cyber Computer Centre, that if that third party is overseas, that also poses issues, because it means from a regulatory perspective, that data isn't covered by Australian law, it's covered by the law of that other country, which also has, regulatory sort of issues in terms of the investigation of the incident. But at the moment, none of that's actually been shared, so we don't know what that situation is.
Matthew, as the investigations continue, this story comes on the back of the US Federal Bureau of Investigation warning that a notorious cyber criminal group dubbed Scatter Spider was actually targeting airlines. Now, the investigators allege that these hackers use social engineering techniques that often bypass very sophisticated multi-factor systems, which is considered one of the strongest online security measures. Now, as we mentioned, we don't know if this is involved in this latest cyber attack. But how concerning is that development if they're bypassing all of these so-called best procedures ever?
So in terms of Scatter Spider, they're a hacking group that's linked to a number of sort of activities. And what they mean by social engineering is it's actually an easy way to bypass the technology is you just focus on an individual. So an example is I could contact an organization pretending to be from the IT department and ask for access to my data. And if I'm convincing enough, that person will share access of that data to me and I can download it. So there's no technology involved. There's no compromising technology. It's just using, human interaction to try to persuade someone to do something they don't want to do. So social engineering is a major challenge. And again, all the money a company can invest in technology, the weakest link is the least secure person within your organization. So if they manage to contact the right person and persuade that person that they were from Qantas or another, figure of authority and data should be shared with them, yeah, it's as simple as that. It used to be the case with IT, companies used to check their staff by phoning them up, pretending to be from the IT department, asking, can you share your username and password? And people used to tell them that, over the phone. It's as simple as that.
So, Matthew, finally, how concerned should Australians be about this latest cyber attack? And is there information they need to be on the lookout for any suspicious activity if they are one of the affected customers, because hackers will try and use that information right now?
If people are concerned, simply change their password. They should implement something called multi-factor authentication, which is like an extra process when you log into Qantas. You can either use an app or you get sent a code. So it means if someone has your username and password, they don't have that extra level in the process to log in. And without that code, they can't log in. But more importantly, if you receive email from Qantas or people phoning up saying they're from Qantas, just to be aware, check what's in the email, check that the address is correct, check, if the person has the right information on the phone, and quite simply, if they don't, hang up or delete the email, as simple as that. So again, it's just being aware. And usually people are aware when unusual circumstances happen, when, I haven't been contacted by Qantas before via email being asked this information, or no one from Qantas has ever phoned me up asking for my passport details. I don't think, this is right, and simply just hang up.
We appreciate you joining us, Matthew. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That was Professor Matthew Warren, the Director of the Centre for Cybersecurity Research and Innovation at RMIT University. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and we'll be back in your feed tomorrow at 6 a.m. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.